She made a young Korean maid disappear for breathing too loudly, and nobody ever saw her again. For 3 years, this mafia boss's wife terrorized everyone in the Park estate. Nobody dared to challenge her. Nobody even tried, until the day a black American maid with nothing left to lose became the target of her cruelty. This is the story of how one woman's dignity shattered an empire of fear. Not with violence or revenge, but with something far more dangerous, the truth. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll never look at power the same way again. This isn't a story about revenge. No, it's about something far more powerful than that. Stay with me. Let me tell you a story about courage, honor, and what happens when someone finally refuses to break. Welcome to Soul Woven Stories. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your thoughts on the story and where you are watching from. In the heart of Seoul, there was an estate called the Park Mansion. Not just any mansion, mind you. This was the kind of place where the chandeliers cost more than most people's houses. Original artwork covered walls lined with silk. The marble floors were so polished you could see your reflection. Even the air smelled like money and danger. And in this world of luxury and whispered warnings, there was one name that made everyone freeze. Vanessa Liu. She was the wife of Min Jae Park, a man whose name alone could end lives. His reputation controlled half the underground economy of South Korea. His word was law in circles where the law didn't dare to tread. But Vanessa? She built something different. She built an empire of cruelty. Every morning at precisely 7 a.m., she would descend the grand staircase. Always perfectly dressed in designer labels, always wearing that cold smile, and always ready to destroy someone's day, or their entire life, if they dared to exist imperfectly in her presence. The staff would literally hold their breath when she entered a room. They'd all seen what she could do. There was Ji Woo, a young woman saving money to bring her sick mother from Busan, reduced to sobbing tears because a tablecloth had a wrinkle. Vanessa didn't just humiliate her. She made her kneel on the marble floor for 2 hours while the other staff watched. And according to those who were there, Vanessa sat nearby, sipping tea, enjoying the show. There was the driver who scratched the car. He simply never came back to work. Nobody asked questions. Nobody dared. That's the kind of person Vanessa Liu was. Now, into this world walked a woman named Aaliyah Daniels. Aaliyah was 28 years old, and 6 months ago, her life had changed completely. She'd been working as a middle school teacher in Atlanta, living a modest but meaningful life. She loved that job. She was good at it, too, connecting with students others had written off, making literature come alive in ways that made kids actually care. But then her mother got sick. Stage 3 cancer. The medical bills came fast and merciless, drowning her teacher's salary like a tsunami. Insurance covered some of it. Not nearly enough. So there she was, adjusting the crisp white apron of a maid's uniform, trying to remember which tea Vanessa preferred, feeling like she'd crossed an ocean and landed on a completely different planet, one where she didn't speak the language, didn't understand the rules, and had just become the newest target in a very dangerous game. She didn't know it yet, but the moment Vanessa's hand connected with her face would change everything. Not just for her, but for everyone in that house who'd learned to live with fear. Because Aaliyah Daniels was about to learn something crucial. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is simply refuse to be afraid. And Min Jae Park, the man everyone feared, the man with dragons tattooed up his neck like ancient warnings, was about to remember who he'd promised himself he would be, before politics and power made him forget. This is that story. Mrs. Cho had kind eyes, but they carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much. She was maybe 60, with silver streaking through her tightly pulled back hair, and when she spoke to Aaliyah on that first morning, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Listen carefully," Mrs. Cho said in English heavily accented but clear. "I will only say this once. Mrs. Liu, you never call her Vanessa, never, she has rules. Break them, and you will not last a week." They stood in the service hallway, where the marble gave way to plain tile and the crystal chandeliers disappeared into fluorescent lights. The real house, Mrs. Cho called it. where the staff lived in the shadows of luxury. Rule 1, never look her in the eye. Ever. Keep your gaze down, respectful. Rule 2, never speak unless she asks you a direct question. Even then, answer in 3 words or less. Rule 3, perfection is the minimum. Not good enough. Not almost right. Perfect. Aaliyah nodded, her stomach tightening. And Mr. Park? Mrs. Cho's expression shifted, became almost thoughtful. Mr. Park is different. He is feared, yes. Dangerous, yes. But he is rarely here. His business takes him away. When he is home, he stays in his study or takes meetings in the East Wing. You will probably never see him. She paused. Mrs. Liu, however, is everywhere. Always watching. Always waiting for someone to make a mistake. The first week passed in a blur of polishing, cleaning, and invisible service. Aaliyah learned to move through rooms like a ghost, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to make herself small. She saw Min Jae Park only once that week, passing through the main hall as she arranged fresh flowers. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his suit perfectly tailored. The tattoos started just above his collar, intricate patterns that disappeared beneath the fabric. His eyes swept the room with the practiced awareness of someone always calculating threat levels. When his gaze landed on her for just a moment, Aaliyah felt her breath catch. Cold eyes, yes. Assessing. But not cruel. There was a difference she couldn't quite name, like the difference between a wolf and a rabid dog. One was dangerous by nature. The other was dangerous by sickness. Then he was gone, and Aaliyah exhaled. But Vanessa? Vanessa was always there. On the 4th day, Aaliyah witnessed what Mrs. Cho had warned her about. She was polishing silver in the corner of the dining room when Vanessa entered for lunch. Ji-woo, a sweet girl barely 20, was setting the table with trembling hands. Vanessa circled the table slowly, examining everything with the intensity of someone searching for failure. She found it, of course. A barely perceptible wrinkle in the cream-colored tablecloth, no bigger than Aaliyah's thumb. What is this? Vanessa's voice was silk over steel. Ji-woo's face went white. I'm sorry, Mrs. Liu, Did I ask for your excuses? Vanessa picked up the edge of the tablecloth, holding it between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. Do you think I deserve to eat at a table that looks like it came from a street market? No, Mrs. Liu, I'll change it immediately. You'll do more than that. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. You'll kneel. Ji-woo's eyes filled with tears. Please. Kneel. Or pack your things and go back to whatever village you came from. Your choice. Aaliyah watched, frozen, as Ji-woo slowly sank to her knees on the marble floor. Watched as Vanessa sat down to eat her lunch, occasionally glancing at the crying girl with something that looked disturbingly like satisfaction. And Aaliyah understood, this wasn't about standards. This was about power. This was about making people break. 3 weeks into her employment, Aaliyah was assigned afternoon tea service. Mrs. Cho delivered the news with an expression that might have been sympathy or warning, maybe both. Mr. Park is hosting business associates today. Mrs. Liu will be present. You will serve. She paused. Be perfect. Aaliyah spent 40 minutes on the silver tray alone. She polished it until she could see every detail of her reflection. Checked it under 3 different lights. Wiped it down with a microfiber cloth one final time. Her hands were steady, but her heart hammered against her ribs. The formal sitting room was full when she entered. Min Jae sat in a leather chair near the window, 3 men in expensive suits arranged around him. They spoke in Korean, voices low and serious. The household staff lined the walls like statues, Mrs. Cho, Ji-woo, 2 other maids, the butler. All perfectly still. And Vanessa, positioned on the sofa in a blue dress that probably cost more than Aaliyah's entire year's salary, watching everything with those calculating eyes. Aaliyah moved carefully, setting the tea service on the table with practiced precision. The silver tray gleamed under the chandelier light. She'd done everything right. She knew she had. Wait. Vanessa's voice cut through the room like a blade. The Korean conversation stopped mid-sentence. She rose gracefully, moving toward Aaliyah with the deliberate steps of a predator. She picked up the tray, tilting it toward the light, examining it with theatrical scrutiny. This is tarnished. Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Completely unacceptable. Aaliyah's throat went dry. Mrs. Liu, I polished. The slap came so fast Aaliyah didn't see it coming. Vanessa's hand connected with her cheek with a crack that echoed through the suddenly silent room. The force snapped Aaliyah's head to the side. She tasted copper, blood from where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. The room held its breath. Aaliyah could feel every eye on her, waiting. Waiting for her to crumble, to apologize, to disappear like all the others. She straightened slowly, blood pooling in her mouth, and kept her eyes down. Her cheek burned. Her pride burned hotter. Then a voice, quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority, is the silver clean? Min-jae. He hadn't moved from his chair, but somehow his presence filled the entire room. Aaliyah swallowed the blood. Her voice came out steady, clear. Yes, sir. The silence stretched impossibly long. She could feel Vanessa's fury radiating like heat. Could sense the staff's shock. Could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Min-jae's eyes moved from Aaliyah to the tray, then to his wife. When he spoke, his tone was conversational, almost casual. But underneath it ran something cold and final. Then there is no problem. Vanessa's face flushed deep red. Her mouth opened, closed. For a moment, Aaliyah thought she might explode. But Min-jae had already turned back to his associates, resuming the conversation in Korean as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't just rewritten every rule in that house. As if he hadn't just declared war on his own wife. Vanessa stood frozen, her hands still raised slightly, her chest rising and falling with barely controlled rage. Then she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against marble like gunshots. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And Aaliyah understood, with sudden terrifying clarity, that she'd just become the most dangerous person in this house, not because of what she'd done, but because of what Min-jae Park had just chosen to defend. Mrs. Cho found Aaliyah in the service hallway 10 minutes later, pressing a cold cloth to her split lip. The older woman's face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped Aaliyah's shoulders. You need to understand something, Mrs. Cho whispered urgently. What just happened, that was unprecedented. In 3 years, Mr. Park has never contradicted his wife. Not once. Not over anything. She paused, her eyes searching Aaliyah's face. Which means you are now in terrible danger. Aaliyah lowered the cloth. Because he defended me? Because she will see it as humiliation. And Mrs. Liu does not forgive humiliation. Mrs. Cho glanced down the hallway, as if Vanessa might materialize from the shadows. She will retaliate. I don't know how or when, but she will. You must be very, very careful. That evening, as Aaliyah helped serve dinner, she felt it, the shift in the atmosphere. Min-jae sat at the head of the long dining table, Vanessa at the opposite end. The distance between them felt like miles. They barely spoke. When they did, it was in Mandarin, sharp, clipped exchanges that Aaliyah couldn't understand but could feel. Vanessa's voice carried an edge like breaking glass. Min-jae's responses were brief, controlled, final. And he was watching. Not obviously, but Aaliyah caught it, the way his eyes would track her movement across the room, the slight tension in his shoulders when Vanessa's gaze followed her. It wasn't attraction. It was something else. Something that felt almost like protection. Later, as Aaliyah was collecting dishes in the kitchen, Ji-woo appeared beside her, drying plates with nervous energy. Everyone is talking about what happened, Ji-woo said quietly in English she'd been practicing. Nobody can believe it. Believe what? That Mr. Park defended you. Ji-woo glanced toward the door, then back. He has never done that before. Never. When Mrs. Liu fired the driver, Mr. Park said nothing. When she made me kneel, he walked past like I was invisible. He never interferes with her games. Aaliyah set down the dishes carefully. So why now? That's what everyone is asking. Ji-woo's voice dropped even lower. Some think maybe he's tired of her. Others think maybe you remind him of someone. But Mrs. Park, she knows something changed today. And she looked at you like. Ji-woo shivered. Like she wants you erased. That night, lying in her small room in the staff quarters, Aaliyah touched her swollen lip and replayed the moment. Min-jae's quiet question. Her honest answer. His declaration that shifted everything. She thought about Mrs. Cho's warning, about Ji-woo's fear, about the way Vanessa's eyes had promised retribution. But she also thought about Min-jae's gaze, cold but not cruel. Dangerous but not directed at her. Something had changed in that house. Some invisible line had been crossed. Aaliyah just didn't understand what it meant yet, or why a man who'd ignored 3 years of cruelty had suddenly decided that she, of all people, was worth defending. But she had a feeling she was about to find out. And that terrified her more than the slap ever could. The retaliation came exactly 5 days later. Aaliyah was collecting laundry from Vanessa's dressing room, a space larger than her entire apartment back in Atlanta, filled with clothes that cost more than most people's cars. She handled each garment carefully, methodically, the way Mrs. Cho had taught her. She was folding a silk blouse when Vanessa swept in, her presence like a cold front. What have you done? Vanessa's voice was ice. Aaliyah looked up, confused. Mrs. Liu? Vanessa held up a dress, midnight blue, designer label, intricate beading along the neckline. There was a tear in the fabric near the shoulder, the beading loose and scattered. This is my favorite dress. Do you have any idea what this costs? Vanessa's voice rose with each word. You've destroyed it. I didn't, Aaliyah started, but Vanessa was already moving toward the door. Mrs. Cho. Get Mr. Park. Now. 10 minutes later, Aaliyah stood in Min-jae's study, flanked by Mrs. Cho and Vanessa. The room smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Min-jae sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. She ruined my dress, Vanessa said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. This is incompetence at best, deliberate sabotage at worst. I want her fired. Immediately. Min-jae's eyes moved to Aaliyah. Did you damage the dress? No, sir. Aaliyah kept her voice steady. The dress was already damaged when I picked it up. She's lying. Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. Fire her. Now. Min-jae was silent for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone, tapped the screen a few times. Tae-hyun. Pull the security footage from Mrs. Liu's dressing room. Last 48 hours. Vanessa's face went very still. 20 minutes later, Min-jae dismissed everyone except his wife. The study door closed. Aaliyah stood in the hallway with Mrs. Cho, her heart pounding. They couldn't hear words, but they heard tone, Min-jae's voice, low and controlled, saying something in Mandarin. Then Vanessa's response, higher, defensive. Then silence. When the door opened, Vanessa emerged pale and shaking. She didn't look at Aaliyah. Didn't look at anyone. She walked past them like a ghost, her usual confidence completely shattered. Min-jae appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Cho, please ensure Aaliyah has the rest of the day off. She has done nothing wrong. That evening, Aaliyah was walking through the garden, her first real moment of peace in days, when she heard voices from an open window. Min-jae's study. She knew she shouldn't listen, but she couldn't help herself. Don't understand why you're protecting her. That was Tae-hyun, Min-jae's second-in-command, speaking Korean accented English. Because she doesn't deserve to be destroyed for existing. Min-jae's voice was tired. And because I've allowed this to go on too long. The alliance with her family is not worth sacrificing my honor for. A pause. The boss is done with her, Taehyun. I'm just waiting for the right moment. One that won't start a war. Aaliyah's breath caught. She pressed herself against the wall, processing what she'd just heard. Min-jae wasn't just protecting her. He was using her, or rather, Vanessa's reaction to her, as a catalyst for something larger. Something that had been building for 3 years. And Aaliyah had just become the center of it, whether she wanted to be or not. Mrs. Cho found Aaliyah in the staff kitchen the next morning, staring into a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Come, the older woman said softly. We need to talk. Privately. They went to Mrs. Cho's small office, a cramped room with a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the garden. Mrs. Cho closed the door, locked it, then poured 2 cups of tea with hands that were surprisingly steady. You need to understand what you've walked into, Mrs. Cho began. Not just this house, but the situation. The marriage. Aaliyah wrapped her hands around the warm cup. I'm listening. 3 years ago, Mr. Park's organization was at war with a rival group. Many people died. It was ugly. Mrs. Cho's eyes grew distant. The Liu family, Vanessa's family, they control significant territory in China, with connections throughout Asia. They proposed an alliance. A marriage to unite the families and end the bloodshed. An arranged marriage. Yes. Mr. Park agreed because he is practical. Because peace was worth the sacrifice. Mrs. Cho took a slow sip of tea. But Vanessa, she saw this marriage as a coronation. She believed that being Mrs. Park made her untouchable. That she could do anything, treat anyone however she wished, and her husband would support her because of the alliance. And he did, Aaliyah said quietly. For 3 years. Because breaking the marriage would risk war. Mrs. Cho leaned forward. But I have worked for Mr. Park for 15 years, long before Vanessa. I know him. He values loyalty, honor, respect. Everything Vanessa is not. Every cruelty she commits, it eats at him. But he's been trapped, until now. Until me. Until you. Mrs. Cho's gaze was sharp, assessing. You're different, Aaliyah. You're not Korean, so you're not bound by the same cultural expectations of deference. You're foreign, an outsider, which makes you both vulnerable and strangely free. And when Vanessa attacked you, something in Mr. Park snapped. Or perhaps, awakened. Aaliyah set down her cup. So I'm what? A test? A way for him to challenge her without challenging her directly? You're a symbol, Mrs. Cho corrected. A line in the sand. Each time he defends you, he's sending a message, to Vanessa, to her family, to his own people. That he will no longer tolerate this behavior. That his patience has limits. That's a dangerous position to be in. Very dangerous. Mrs. Cho didn't soften the truth. Vanessa will escalate. She has to, because if she doesn't, she loses all the power she spent 3 years building. And a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. Aaliyah thought about her mother back in Atlanta, about the medical bills that kept her here, about how easy it would be to resign, to walk away, to find safety somewhere else. But she also thought about Jiwoo kneeling on marble floors. About Thomas crying as he removed his uniform. About every person Vanessa had broken simply because she could. I'm not running, Aaliyah said finally. Even though it might cost you everything? Especially because of that. Aaliyah met Mrs. Cho's eyes. Because someone needs to stand. And maybe that's why I'm here. The escalation started small, then grew like a storm gathering strength. First, Aaliyah's uniform went missing. Then her personal photographs, pictures of her mother, her friends back home, were found torn to pieces in the trash. Small cruelties that could be dismissed as accidents or coincidence. Then came the stairs. Aaliyah was carrying fresh linens down the main staircase when she felt hands on her back, a sharp, sudden push. She tumbled forward, linen scattering like snow. She managed to catch the railing halfway down, her shoulder slamming into the marble with a crack that echoed through the foyer. Pain exploded up her arm. Above her, Vanessa stood at the top of the stairs, hand over her mouth in mock horror. "Oh my goodness. Are you all right? You should really be more careful." Mrs. Cho and Jiwoo rushed to help her up. Aaliyah's shoulder screamed in protest, probably bruised but not broken. She looked up at Vanessa, saw the satisfaction behind the false concern, and said nothing. But Min-jae saw the bruises. That evening, Taehyun appeared in the staff quarters. "Boss wants me to keep an eye on things," he said simply. He was built like a wall, with scars that told stories Aaliyah didn't want to know. "I'll be around." The rumors started the next day, whispered behind hands, spreading through the staff like poison. That Aaliyah was sleeping with Min-jae. That she was a homewrecker. That she'd seduced him to gain favor. Jiwoo came to Aaliyah in tears. "I don't believe it, but others, they're saying terrible things." "Let them talk," Aaliyah said, though it hurt more than she wanted to admit. "The truth doesn't need defending." But Vanessa wasn't done. 3 days later, Aaliyah was cleaning near the conservatory when she heard voices, Vanessa speaking in rapid Mandarin with two men Aaliyah had never seen before. They were dressed in expensive suits, but there was something predatory about them, something that marked them as dangerous. Aaliyah understood enough Mandarin to catch fragments. "Problem needs to be solved, permanently, can't have witnesses, make it look like an accident." Her blood ran cold. She slipped away quietly, her heart hammering. Found Taehyun in the hallway outside Min-jae's study. "There are two men with Mrs. Liu," she whispered urgently. I think they're planning something. Something bad." Taehyun's expression hardened. "Go to your quarters. Lock the door. Don't come out until I get you." "What's happening?" "What's happening," Taehyun said grimly, "is that Mrs. Liu just crossed a line she can't come back from. And the boss has been waiting for exactly this." He disappeared into Min-jae's study. Through the door, Aaliyah heard Min-jae's voice, sharp and commanding in Korean. That night, Aaliyah lay awake in her locked room, listening to footsteps in the hallways, to doors opening and closing, to the house rearranging itself around some invisible axis. She knew, with the certainty of someone standing in the eye of a hurricane, that everything was about to change. The storm had been gathering for 3 years. And she was the lightning rod that would finally make it break. It happened on a Tuesday night, under a moonless sky. Aaliyah had been summoned, a note slipped under her door, and signed, telling her to come to the garden at midnight. She knew it was a trap. Knew she shouldn't go. But something in her refused to hide. She stepped into the garden, the cool night air raising goosebumps on her arms. The landscaped paths were dark, lit only by occasional lanterns that cast long shadows. They came from both sides. Two men, the same ones she'd seen with Vanessa. They moved with the efficiency of professionals, blocking both exits. One of them pulled a knife from inside his jacket, not large, but lethal. Designed for silence. "Mrs. Liu sends her regards," the taller one said in accented English. Aaliyah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "You really want to do this? Here? In his house? Mr. Park doesn't need to know. Accidents happen." The man with the knife stepped closer. "And you've been quite accident-prone lately." Aaliyah backed against a stone fountain, her mind racing for options she didn't have. Then the garden lights blazed on, bright as daylight. Min-jae stood at the garden entrance, flanked by Taehyun and 4 other men. He was in shirt sleeves, no jacket, and the tattoos on his neck seemed to writhe in the harsh light. His expression was perfectly calm, the kind of calm that comes before violence. "Drop the weapon." His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The enforcers hesitated. The one with the knife looked back at his partner, calculating odds they didn't like. "I said drop it." The knife clattered to the stone path. Min-jae walked forward slowly, his men fanning out to surround the two enforcers. When he spoke, it was in Mandarin, a long, deliberate statement that Aaliyah couldn't fully understand. But she caught the tone, not angry, but final. A pronouncement, not a threat. The two men went pale. You will return to the Liu family, Min Jae continued in English, clearly for Aaliyah's benefit, and deliver this message. Your daughter has betrayed both you and me. She has brought dishonor to both our houses. What happens next is on her hands, not mine. He stepped aside, creating a path to the exit. Go. Now. And be grateful you're leaving alive. They went, practically running. The garden fell silent except for the fountain's gentle burble. Min Jae's men dispersed quietly, leaving just him, Taehyun, and Aaliyah. Min Jae turned to her. In the harsh light, his face was all sharp angles and shadows. But his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, held something that looked almost like regret. Are you hurt? Aaliyah shook her head, not trusting her voice. Good. He was quiet for a moment, studying her. You should have run. Anyone sensible would have run. I'm not much for running. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but close. No. I've noticed. He glanced at Taehyun. Ensure she gets back safely. Then, as he turned to leave, you've shown more honor in 6 months than my wife has in 3 years. Tomorrow, everyone learns the truth. All of it. Aaliyah found her voice. What truth? Min Jae looked back at her, and in that moment, she saw not the feared Mafia boss, but a man who'd been trapped in a prison of his own making. That some alliances, he said quietly, cost more than any war ever could. The meeting was called for 10 a.m. in the estate's main conference room, a space that had witnessed countless deals, negotiations, and sentences. Today, it would witness a reckoning. Aaliyah watched from the hallway, where Mrs. Cho had positioned her with the other senior staff. Through the open doors, she could see the room filling with Min Jae's organization, his lieutenants, his advisors, men whose names carried weight in Seoul's underworld. At the head of the table, 3 large screens showed video connections to China. The Liu family representatives, dressed formally, their expressions already wary. Min Jae entered last, carrying a leather portfolio. Vanessa was already seated, her posture radiating defiance and fury. She hadn't been told what this meeting was about. That much was obvious. Min Jae remained standing. Thank you all for coming. This will not take long. He opened the portfolio, removing several documents. 3 years ago, I entered into a marriage alliance with the Liu family to end bloodshed and create stability. I have honored that agreement. My wife has not. Vanessa's face went rigid. What are you? You will speak when I'm finished. Min Jae's voice was ice. The room fell silent. He laid the first document on the table. This is evidence of embezzlement. Over the past 2 years, Vanessa has systematically stolen from our operations. The total, approximately $8 million, moved through shell accounts to banks in Switzerland. On the screens, the Liu family representatives leaned forward, their expressions darkening. The second document. This is photographic evidence of an ongoing affair with Chen Wei, son of the Chen family, our rivals. The same family we made peace with through this marriage. Vanessa stood abruptly. Those are lies. Fabrications. The dates are time-stamped. The bank records are verified. Min Jae's voice never rose, never wavered. But this, he placed the final document down, this is the worst betrayal. For 18 months, she has been feeding information about our operations to competitors. Shipment routes. Safe houses. Business partnerships. 3 of my men are dead because of intelligence leaks that trace directly back to her. The room erupted. The Liu family representatives were shouting in Mandarin at Vanessa. Min Jae's men were on their feet, rage and disbelief on their faces. This alliance was meant to bring honor to both families, Min Jae said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Instead, your daughter has brought shame, theft, and betrayal. I am dissolving this marriage, effective immediately. The alliance is ended. On the screens, the eldest Lu representative, Vanessa's uncle, spoke in heavily accented English. We accept the annulment. She has disgraced us. We disown her actions and cut all ties. No. Vanessa's composure finally shattered completely. You can't do this. I am your wife. I am. You are nothing. Min-jae's words fell like a guillotine blade. Vanessa's wild eyes found Aaliyah in the hallway. This is your fault. You poisoned him against me. You. She lunged toward Aaliyah, but Min-jae moved faster, stepping between them with a presence that stopped Vanessa cold. No, he said quietly, but everyone heard it. This is yours. You had power, respect, protection. You could have been a partner, an equal. Instead, you chose cruelty. You forgot that cruelty is not strength, it's weakness dressed in power. Vanessa stared at him, trembling with rage and humiliation, then finally broke. Vanessa left the estate within the hour, escorted by Taehyun to ensure she took only what she'd arrived with 3 years ago. No jewelry. No designer clothes. No access to accounts. The Lu family's public statement was released before she'd even reached the airport. They disavowed all connection to her actions and withdrew from any association with her name. She was gone as if she'd never existed. Erased by the very power she'd thought made her untouchable. That afternoon, Min-jae called a meeting of all household staff, something unprecedented in itself. They gathered in the main hall, nervous and uncertain. Mrs. Cho stood beside Aaliyah, her hand briefly squeezing Aaliyah's in silent support. Min-jae stood before them, no podium, no distance. Just a man addressing people he'd failed to protect. I owe you all an apology, he began. For 3 years, I allowed cruelty to flourish in this house. I told myself it was necessary for peace, for politics, for the greater good. I was wrong. You deserved better. You will have better. He outlined changes, better wages, clearer protocols, a formal grievance process. Things that should have always existed. This house will be different now, he finished. I give you my word. Later, Min-jae asked Aaliyah to his study. She entered to find him standing by the window, looking out at the garden where, just last night, men had come to kill her. I have a proposition, he said without preamble. I need an executive assistant. Someone I can trust. Someone who has proven they cannot be intimidated or corrupted. He turned to face her. The salary would be substantial. Enough to cover your mother's medical care completely, and then some. You would work directly with me, legitimate business operations, nothing illegal. You would have respect, authority, and my protection. Aaliyah's heart raced. Why me? Because you reminded me who I wanted to be. His expression softened slightly. Loyalty, honor, protection of the vulnerable, these were my principles before politics corrupted them. You stood in front of cruelty and refused to break. That took more courage than anything I've done in years. Aaliyah thought about teaching in Atlanta, about the life she'd left behind. Then she thought about Ji-woo's tear-stained face, about Mrs. Cho's quiet strength, about standing in that garden facing down men with knives. You didn't need reminding, she said quietly. You just needed permission to act on what you already knew was right. Min-jae studied her for a long moment. Is that a yes? Yes. That evening, Aaliyah sat in her room, soon to be upgraded to proper quarters, and called her mother. Baby girl. How are you? I'm good, Mama. Really good. Aaliyah smiled, feeling tears prick her eyes. And I have news about your medical bills. 3 weeks later, Aaliyah sat across from Min-jae in his study, reviewing contracts for a new legitimate shipping venture. She wore professional clothes now, not a uniform. Her opinions were sought, valued, implemented. Min-jae looked up from a document, caught her eye. You're smiling. I'm thinking about something, Mrs. Cho said. About dignity being the one thing no one can take from you. Aaliyah set down her pen. She was right. She usually is. Min-jae returned to his papers, but there was something lighter about his posture, something that hadn't been there before. Aaliyah realized this was what power actually looked like, not fear or cruelty, but integrity. The courage to choose right over easy. The strength to protect rather than dominate. She'd come to Seoul desperate and alone, just trying to survive. Now she was thriving. And somewhere in that transformation, she'd helped a dangerous man remember how to be good. Or maybe she'd just given him permission to be what he'd always wanted to be beneath the weight of politics and violence. Either way, they'd both found something they'd thought was lost: purpose, respect, and the understanding that true strength comes not from breaking others, but from refusing to be broken yourself. The story could have ended in tragedy. Instead, it ended in transformation. And that, Aaliyah thought as she picked up her pen again, was the most powerful ending of all. Hello, friends. In this story, we learn that the most powerful weapon against cruelty isn't fear or silence. It's the courage to stand with dignity when everyone expects you to break. Thank you so much for watching. Can you like, subscribe, and share?